Have you ever looked at a great speaker like Steve Jobs or watched a beautiful TED talk and thought, man, I wish I could do that as well? But I either don't have the confidence or I feel like I'm blanked out when I speak, and I'm not just sure how to engage a crowd at that level. And after making a bunch of mistakes and having a bunch of different mentors guide me through this entire process, I've learned that confidence or blanking out are not really the things that are holding my communication back. In fact, when I looked at legendary speakers like Steve Jobs, Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, I found out that they follow very simple patterns that are common in almost every great speaker. And these are things that you and I can start applying to sound just a little more influential in the way we communicate. By the way, if you're new here, we post content on communications all the time. So subscribe and like this video so that it reaches more people. Now, after looking at hours of videos by some of the greatest speakers, we've compiled just 4 points, which we found common in almost all of them. And it's something that we can borrow from top communicators to help us speak a little more clearly and confidently. Let's get started. Now, when it comes to public speaking and presenting, we often think that a great speaker has to be confident and have great modulation and all of that stuff, which is fine. But the very first thing that these speakers have in common is value first content. Value first content is a mindset shift where we often think that when I go on stage, I have to look good, I have to look great. And in public speaking, the speaker does not matter. The only thing that matters is what the audience really wants and needs. And as the speakers, if we can approach it from that perspective, we're not looking internally to validate our nervousness, our confidence, or whatever it might be. We're just looking at adding value to the audience. And Gary Vaynerchuk, who, if you don't know him, by the way, he's this business person. He's become very big in the past decade or so. And he talks a lot about marketing content, business content, and everything. And he has this value first approach. In fact, he's written this book called as Jab, 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 Right Hook. And this book is primarily about marketing. In it, it says that when we market something or when we're trying to sell something, don't ask, give 3 times and then ask once. So jab, 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 and then right hook. And the same principle can apply to speaking as well. When we go to speak, we're not here to come across as great, confident speakers. We're just here to provide constant value to our audience. In fact, when Gary goes on stage, many times he'll start speaking and he will say that, okay, I'm going to cut my speech short so that I can spend more time in Q&A, because he knows that's what his audience will benefit from, a more personal touch. And when he speaks, he's rarely trying to sell something or promote something. He's mainly just understanding his audience as well as he can and is trying to deliver basis their requirements. Once we do that and we get that principle in our mind, the whole idea of public speaking starts to change, because now we're not looking at things from the perspective of coming across as great speakers. We're just coming across as people who want to provide value. And if you think about 2 speakers, one is very confident and the other is super nervous, but the person who's nervous is trying very hard to make sure that you get a strong takeaway, things that you can actually implement after the speech or presentation is done. As an audience member, which one of these 2 would you prefer? It's mostly going to be the nervous one who's focusing on the value. So that's the first thing, a value first approach. The second pillar is simplicity. In our communications training, we have a lot of people who are trying to expand their vocabulary, which is a great thing, but we need to have the right approach towards vocabulary expansion. We don't want to use fancy words just for the sake of it. Simplicity is a much more powerful communication tool. And who better to use as an example here than Steve Jobs? He uses such simple language and such simple slides and designs to communicate very, very impactful points. These are some lines from some of his presentations, which are super simple to understand, super simple in their wording, but just have a fantastic impact.
It doesn't work because the buttons and the controls can't change. They can't change for each application, and they can't change down the road if you think of another great idea you want to add to this product. Well, how do you solve this? It turns out we have solved it. We solved it in computers 20 years ago. We solved it with a bitmap screen that could display anything we want, put any user interface up, and a pointing device. We solved it with the mouse, right? We solved this problem. So how are we going to take this to a mobile device? Well, what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen. A giant screen.
So don't aim to sound fancy or have very fancy designs. If we aim for value first and we use simplistic language, we're good. Number three is storytelling. Most great speakers understand that information is boring, but narration is engaging. And when we narrate effectively, we're not just able to communicate our points, but we have a much higher chance of making an audience act towards whatever points we're communicating. And storytelling is a little complicated topic because a lot of us overthink it. That does it involve adding drama? Does it involve adding characters? The main thing to keep in mind is a very simple framework called GPS. It stands for goal, problem, and solution. You essentially want to communicate your goal. You want to talk about the problem or the conflict coming in the way to getting to that goal, and what are the solutions or what are the steps you or anyone can take to overcome those challenges and reach that goal. It's as simple as that. Along with this, we can also use different storytelling frameworks. One of the frameworks that Steve Jobs uses in his famous Stanford speech is called as nested loops. It means taking three isolated stories and then combining them with one valuable takeaway. If you look at that speech, he literally starts and says,
Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories.
And then those 3 stories follow their own progression, and all 3 of them have a convergence towards the end of the speech. So in case you are ever put in a position of a Toastmaster speech, or TED Talk, or anything along those lines, you can use the nested loops theory to have 3 stories in small chunks put out, which have just one common takeaway to it all. And the fourth and final point is your non-verbal delivery. We have to remember that the audience is not just listening to our words, but subconsciously they are judging us based on our non-verbal communications. And I don't want to get too deep over here. We get too caught up in specific hand gestures and facial expressions and movement. All of that is important, but on a very fundamental level, the only thing you need to really keep in mind to start off with is we have to get more and more aware of our natural delivery style. Everyone has their own. Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, has a more in-your-face delivery style. Steve Jobs has a more subtle, calmer way of communicating. Tony Robbins is just very energetic, similar to Gary Vee, but still very different, towering over the entire audience, talking for hours at end without having any dip in energy. What is your non-verbal style? A great way to find this out is, after you're done with this video, just go to ChatGPT and ask it to give you any speech topic related to your industry. Once you get that, put your video camera on and speak on that topic for about 2 minutes. That's all. Stop the video recording and observe yourself. Try to do this recording standing if possible, unlike what I'm doing here, because you'll be able to get a much more holistic understanding of your non-verbals. Once you get that, make a note of what you like and dislike, and then repeat the exercise the following day until you get the desired results that you're looking for. But earlier I did mention about different hand gestures that we can keep in mind to make this process a little easier and a little more structured. We made an entire video on different hand gestures you can utilize in public speaking, and you can check out that entire video right here.